What is your views on the state of the world environment right now?
The world environment is steadily deteriorating on almost all fronts. On the one hand, the scientists are talking about that there are many clear signs of global warming, sea level rise, and a whole lot of serious problems. There is clear suggestion that if we go on like this, then there will be a runaway global warming, which really will have fairly serious impacts. However, on the ground, there is no action. There is on part of no country, as far as I am aware, except possibly Scandinavian countries and maybe some European countries, but now they have also become involved in this Ukraine war and all that, and they also are not able to handle the situation. So there is no real action. I mean, what we have is, as Greta Thunberg says, blah blah blah. People, the leaders of the nation will keep talking about, and as she says, and which is, I think, the very correct diagnosis, that the interests of the rich and powerful are completely inimical to any genuine positive action to halt environmental degradation.
So you have spent over 5 decades now. It's from the 70s when you came to India. So if you can briefly take us through your journey as an what you call yourself as a field ecologist and field on anthropologist.
Haha. But not just since I came back from US, you see, uh, in a way, even when I was in school and in college days, then I was involved in keeping careful record of birds and some of these other events. And indeed, I have actually written about my observations in, there was this Marathi science, popular science journal Srishti. So I think at the age of whatever, 15 years or so, I have written there about my observations on the birds of Mahabaleshwar and so on. So in a sense, it is a long exercise of fascination with and involvement with science. And when I was doing my master's in Mumbai, then on the fish, then of course I was very much engaged in some sense on ecological and in a way field ecological studies, because I did a dissertation on this very tasty fish, mandeli, Coeliadus sumeri, and I spent a lot of time. When you talk about an anthropologist, I spent a lot of time with the fishermen talking about their interests, and I went out on a Japanese trawler which had come to India to train our fishermen and their feelings about trawling. And I went out on the trawler, and as I said, I talked to those Japanese sailors and learned from them. Some people get horrified about eating live crabs. And, in sense, as an anthropologist, I believe that you must become one with the whoever you are with, and whatever they are eating, you must eat, including, as I said, with the Goan tribals, their red ant chutney and everything else. So that in a sense, I had started already. So all these decades, then Harvard University, of course, was very important academically, scientifically, and I did a very nice thesis, fortunately for me, and taught there and did a lot of research. Some of my most cited research papers come from that time. And then back in India, this continued. So it is, in a sense, very long journey, at least maybe 65 years, I would say, of scientific interest and involvement. Uh, I have thoroughly enjoyed it. Fortunately, the way I had developed broad interests in all branches of not just natural sciences, but sociology, anthropology, history. I have mentioned that our next door neighbor Iravati Karve was a distinguished anthropologist, sociologist, and I was influenced by her. I mentioned at the age of 9 years, actually. I went on a whole month field trip with her and saw her research, so to say, field research in action. Uh, my father was an economist, and in a sense, an economist who worked on the ground. And even at a younger age, 6 years or so, I remember we went out. He was involved in promoting cooperative sugar factories and went around talking to the farmers and sitting on the ground with the farmers and eating meals. So it has been a long journey, and I have thoroughly enjoyed all aspects. And
If
amongst other things, it was possible for me because of this to um, kind of synthesize many things which are not very much done. These two books that Ramchandra Guha and I wrote, this Fisherland and
Fisherland, yeah.
Ecology and Equity, uh, were very fascinating experiences. Interestingly enough, uh, actually, sometimes I am referred to as Madhav Gadgil, a historian. Of course, I am not a historian in that sense, though I have been very much interested in history all along also. But so then, unlike most biologists who are allergic to mathematics, I
Yes,
was
yes.
very much fascinated, and I have mentioned, one of the personalities which influenced me, though I never met him personally, was JBS Haldane, this great scientist, evolutionary biologist who declared when France and England and Israel invaded Suez that he will no longer stay in this imperialistic country, and came to India and became a citizen here. And my father was involved in bringing him to India. So, and we had his whole. My father had an incredible collection of books, and all of JBS Haldane's popular books were with me, which I read with great interest, and also his work in mathematical. Uh, he laid the foundations of mathematical genetics, so to say. So, while on one side, from an early age, I became involved in bird watching and recording about birds, and was greatly influenced by Salim Ali. I did not want to do only kind of descriptive science. Salim Ali was a great naturalist, but his science, one may say, is a entirely descriptive science, not analytical. Uh, Certainly, he never passed his BSc, and he said that was because he could not deal with logarithms and such other abominations, he called them. But I was quite at home with these abominations, and so I took the opportunity as soon as I reached Harvard. And of course, luckily, I was married to Sulochana, who was a mathematician. Uh, so she was also of great help. But of learning mathematics and learning about this new tool in 1965, computers had just come into use in the scientific community. Earlier, they had been used in military research and to an extent in industrial research, but scientific research they had just entered in 65. So I was one of the early users of computers as a scientist. So I mastered that tool. And I continued sort of field ecology, not sort of, real field ecology.
Yes.
I did these studies on reproductive effort in herbaceous plants in Harvard's field station, which was interestingly at Concord, where Thoreau wrote his famous works. In any case, so it has been, as I said, very good journey, and fortunately, I was able to get in India a position at the Indian Institute of Science with a great director like Satish Dhawan as the head of the institutions. And there were great opportunities because in other normal universities and so on, very often there is no freedom to really think and work. But here was a very different situation. I mean, Satish Dhawan encouraged me to not only do, I continued to do mathematical biology, and in a sense, I continue to do some versions of that till today, but encouraged me to get involved in field research. And so I could spend a lot of time at Bandipur in field research, and then as I mentioned, actually on management issues because of the. I was asked by Ghorpade,
Yes.
the finance minister, to look into bamboo
Bamboo.
management problems, and um, I had also a faith in people at all levels. So I was very early sure that one must, if one wants to collect good information on ecological situation, you must involve people at the ground level. So to begin with, I started with a whole series of projects of decentralized management with college teachers and then NGOs, but they were always working with the local communities. And this has continued till today, although that way I retired in from Indian Institute of Science in 2003. But I have continued
Working, yes, sir.
other avenues of active science where possible because, as I was saying, I was not a laboratory scientist and I was not dependent on expensive equipment and so on. So it has been a fascinating time.
Yes, sir. So one of the things that when one reads your autobiography, your life has been full of very extraordinary coincidences.
Maybe.
Yes, you were wanting to do oceanography and you were wanting to do your PhD research or something else. You go to a chance lecture and then you change the thing. You come here in India. You mentioned like Fateh Ali and the
Yeah.
generous grant that you got, the first of its kind, and so Ghorpade, the bamboo thing that you said.
Right, right.
So this has been a very fascinating journey of so many coincidences. How would you sum that thing up, sir?
I mean, I guess it must be true of all people. Okay, but those coincidences were also, Ed Wilson, my guru at Harvard, he had, uh, we became very good friends. So we talked a lot about research and how to conduct it and how to conduct life, so to say. He said, look, most people's journey in life is a Brownian motion. The particles are moving here and there, something bumps into them, something goes there, and they then drift into working on something else. Uh, but you will, and he said he knows for sure you will not pursue a Brownian motion. That yes, of course, life will be full of this opportunity, that opportunity, coincidences, but you will have a broad purpose in your mind, and you will pursue that. And I believe that is what I have done. That yes, of course, there were very fortunate coincidences. I mean, I have mentioned, I am always grateful to Satish Dhawan because, as I mentioned, as soon as emergency was declared, I got a farman from Forest Department that I cannot publish anything without their consent. And of course, I was very annoyed. And I was very fond of popular writing. I had become, especially amongst other things, the example of JBS Haldane, and I had been writing. And to be ordered like this would have been disastrous. But Satish Dhawan talked to me and he said, what is the provocation of for this Farman? I showed him an article I had written, which was factual, of course. He read it and he said, you can cite chapter and verse for everything in this article. I said, of course, and anybody is welcome. They can I can take them to that particular site which I mentioned and so on. And he said, throw the letter in
Yes.
garbage box. I will see what they can do. And of course, Satish Dhawan had so much standing that I kept writing, and these people had no guts to uh, do anything, which is, amongst other things, one great strength. It is not just a coincidence. Well, it is a coincidence that we had such a great man as the director who recruited me. But uh, then I have always been completely confident that I can say what I know to be the right thing to say and for which I have, as a scientist, strong objective evidence, and I will do it. So, this is what I have done, and it's been most enjoyable.
Yes, and one more interesting thing that one gets to know about you, sir, is whenever you're working at an institution, be it the Agarkar institution here or Harvard, you're working there, you've always been open and to new ideas, new streams, explore new things. What has been this driving force, sir? What has
Well, I think I think I have the ability to think afresh and innovate. John Maynard Smith, who was a student of JBS Haldane, also in his own standing a great evolutionary biologist, says uh, that almost all academics do a PhD thesis, very often on a topic that their guides suggest, and rest of the life they continue to do minor variations on that piece of work. But at Harvard, nobody suggested that topic to me. I mean, I came up with it on my own. And as Agarkar, I came up with the study of sacred groves, although Vartak was a stimulus. She had no ideas, broader ideas about the ecosystem services of sacred groves and any of those. I came up with those. And when I started working at Bandipur, then census of elephants in Indian forests, entirely innovative ways of doing that had to be devised, and I did that, and so on. So yes, I enjoy that. Maybe in part it is related to um, long conversations I had with very uh, first rate students who were my fellow students at Harvard, where we discussed about, what will be really impactful scientific work. And the consensus was, and these were people like, I don't know if you've heard about Robert Rivers, who did important work on evolution of social behavior and so on, that you should always be thinking of something different and new to do. And I could manage. I mean, obviously, I had the ability and I could manage, and that's how it has gone on.
Yes, sir. And you had very strong ideas about how an academician should be. In, even in your thing, you mentioned, most often the deans, they get the work done. And you have been all the kind of students that you have worked, who have learned under you, a series of students, from Raghavendra Gadagkar or, even Harini, Nagendra. So how has that ideas translated for you to work differently with?
I mean, for instance, luckily, Indian Institute of Science is a very open institution. And when students came from various backgrounds, we could work with them, taking most advantage of their background and suggesting to them something which would be interesting to them and which would take things forward. And I had many ideas. So, for instance, Sukumar, he came with an MSc in botany, and he had this fixed notion that he would have to do a thesis in plant ecology. But he had worked in Gindi National Park on that Gindi Deer Park on the black buck, and I knew he was fascinated by wildlife. And I said, but elephants in South India, they offer many interesting research possibilities. And he jumped at it, and he did, and he continues. I mean, today is a authority on Asian elephant. And same way, Prabhakar did a MTech from IIT Madras and came. And he was fascinated by maps. And then I said, okay, let's think of possibilities of using maps as a tool of documenting ecological history. And he did some very nice work on that and continues. He developed this India Biodiversity Portal. Or Harini was able to, unlike other students very often would be, to pick up new ideas, to understand remote sensing, to work seriously in using remote sensing technology for and ideas of landscape ecology which we are developing. Did a nice thesis. So since we had this broad possibility, and then students came from, as I said, all sorts of backgrounds. Sheshagiri came from agricultural science background, and Prabhakar, as I said, from MTech in IIT, and so on. So all of them could, luckily, they were themselves very motivated and bright. Uh, could do a whole lot of very interesting things. So that was enjoyable. But as I had said, I never was a parasite on them at any point in time because uh, Sukumar himself actually, and his thesis when he was publishing with Cambridge University Press, he himself said you should co-author. And the Cambridge University editor also said, no, no, you must have Madhav Gadgil as co-author. I said, look, but you have done all this work, so it is unfair. I will not co-author. And he published that and he went on. Same way with Raghavendra Gadakkar, who's done very nice work on the paper mask. At the early time, he one or two pieces of work which we did together. Of course, we published together. But otherwise, I said he was offering to publish with me. I said, no, no, no. I will not. You are doing this work. You publish on your own. And I will do my own research, which I did, like the bamboo and so on, much of it, or in the Bandipur with the elephants, I will publish it. I don't need to parasitize on students for scientific publications.
Yes, sir. And now we come to your, sir, your most important, the 3 decades that you spent at IISC,
Yes.
founding the CES, and that interesting phase that was there.
Yeah.
Because it's the longest that you have.
Yes, 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 yes.
So if you can just tell us how was it working at IIC? What was, because when you came back to India, there were a lot of challenges. You had all the opportunities. The professors at Harvard were wanting to you to stay back and everything, sir. A lot of, as you mentioned in your thing, lot of Indian researchers and academicians stay back, and you mentioned that it's for a valid reason.
No, no. Let me make it very clear. Uh, I don't want to boast of being patriotic, but yes, I am simply very fond of India in every way. Its cultural diversity, its natural diversity, its linguistic diversity. As I said, I know and enjoy uh, reading even today Sanskrit, Marathi, Kannada, Hindi, apart from English. So, and there is a variety of things that you learn from all of this. So there is no question. And secondly, of course, I certainly was both influenced by Haldane's remarks about imperialistic Britain and France and Israel in invading Suez, but even more, I was horrified by the war that was going on in Vietnam when I was a graduate student there and then a lecturer. All these things really meant something to me. Maybe they don't mean anything to other people, but I have even mentioned earlier that the way the whites had treated the natives, so to say, when they invaded these continents. So the kind of thing and the cruelty to the slaves and the way Muhammad Ali, who was a great hero of those times, who I also watched, he had been treated really for him to come up finally. Uh, all that somehow meant to me that I did not want to become another whatever uh, agent helping white imperialistic powers. So that was very clear.
Why that was a great motivation for you.
Yes, yes, it was. And then here, uh, as I said, I was very fond of the people and the country, and I could adjust and I could work. And fortunately, of course, there was this great man Satish Dhawan who was the director, and he was supportive all along. Uh, so things worked out very nicely. There is no question of any regret ever. Uh, More than that, as I said, there was so much freedom was given to me to work at IISc, to pursue all lines of thinking and, write the book like this Fisher Land. And I went in 91 as visiting professor to Stanford for state scientists, and some of them had been fellow students at Harvard who are now professors at Stanford. And they were talking with me, and they said they cannot imagine that in the rat race in the American academia, they could free themselves to spend some time and write a book like Ecological History of India. It is impossible for them to imagine. That may be an exaggeration a little bit because gifted people like Jared Diamond have managed many things, but by and large, there are very few like Jared Diamond who can manage.
Yes, sir.
So, in that sense, this was Indian Institute of Science, and this very, very uh, atmosphere of uh, real, genuine interest in science, and many colleagues committed to science, but they were appreciative of many other things. So, it was remarkable.